Hi, I'm Kate Broad. I'm a National Location Planning Manager at Coles Supermarket in Australia. My career has spanned over 25 years so far, and until just a couple of years ago, it was entirely based in the UK. I started out in consultancy, and over the years, I've switched between working in consulting firms and roles with retailers or service providers. I've had the privilege of working with some fantastic companies and some great people. Places like DTZ, Dixon's Group, Collier's, TSB and TUI, to name a few. The common thread across all of these roles has been location planning and analysis. It's been at the heart of what I do, no matter the company or the sector. Now, my move to Australia was somewhat unexpected. At the time I was at TUI, I had a great role and worked with a brilliant team and enjoyed all the perks that came with it, including some very nice travel opportunities. But then a conversation with Steve nudged me in a new direction. He mentioned a role at Coles and it caught my attention. The opportunity looked fantastic, a new challenge, the chance to work in a very different market, and the prospect of relocating to Australia made it even more appealing. I'd actually been to Australia just once before, and just for a short holiday. I absolutely loved it. Earlier in my career, I'd thought about working overseas, but timing was never quite right, or the opportunity didn't present at the right time, but this time it did. The role felt too good not to at least explore. The whole process was quite surreal. It was my first time doing 3 rounds of interviews without putting shoes on or leaving the house, but I was fortunate enough to land the role, and then came the next stage, planning the big move. Relocating to another country for work isn't a small feat. It really is exciting, yes, but there is a lot to think about, from visas and notice periods to logistics of moving your life across the world. It does take time, and I was really lucky that Coles did have a good relocation package and support service and helped me to navigate a lot of things that I don't even think I would have considered. In total, it was about 5 months from getting the offer to starting the job, and I'm pretty sure my new boss would have liked me there sooner, but the visa process, my notice period and international relocation don't really move quickly. Of course, some of the challenges of moving abroad are similar to starting any new job. Learning how the business works, understanding new processes and getting up to speed on the data. But there were also some very specific learning curves. Whilst I had experience with large retailers and service providers, supermarkets were a new space for me. That in itself was a challenge. I welcomed learning a new business model and understanding the depth of detail involved in a supermarket forecast, considering or when compared to the things I'd done before. What really stood out was a difference in the data and geography. I'd spent 25 years immersed in UK geography, and it was second nature. Suddenly I had to rewire that instinct. Not impossible by any means, but it takes time before it feels natural. I also hadn't fully appreciated how much geeky, in-depth knowledge I had of the UK high street and retail parks. Knowledge built up over decades, unfortunately. Then I arrived in Melbourne, a city I'd never been to, and was tasked with leading location planning across 4 Australian states, none of which I'd ever visited before. So I knew from day one I needed to learn fast. That meant spent a lot of time in mapping tools, poring over data, and most importantly, getting out on the road. Site visits became key to understanding the nuances of different regions, and honestly, I'm still learning. But I think the first 6 months were the steepest part of that learning curve. But that's true of almost any new role. All in all, it's been a fantastic experience. I have zero regrets about making the move to Australia. The role at Coles is busy and challenging, but also incredibly rewarding. I'm particularly grateful to be part of a larger team of location specialists. Coming into this role alone as a single location planner would have been a very different experience. But here I've had a lot of support, not just professionally, but personally too. I built friendships within the team, which has helped me to settle into life both at work and outside of it. If you do ever get the opportunity to work abroad, I would 100% recommend it. It isn't without its hurdles, but it is an adventure that can absolutely broaden your horizons and give you a totally new lifestyle, both personally and professionally. I'm all for it.
How many car parking spaces should we build? That was one question that we were grappling with back in 2005 when I was working in mainland China with Tesco supermarkets. At that time, car ownership in China, even in cities like Shanghai, was less than 1 in 10 households, but it was projected to double every 5 years. So on the one hand, we were building hypermarkets to last 15, 20 plus years. On the other hand, the cost of building an extra basement level for car parking you won't be using for 10 years, it was pretty significant. Hi, I'm Tom Brown. I've been out in East Asia doing location planning for the last 20 plus years. And how did I get out here? Well, it wasn't particularly planned. I joined Tesco back in the late 90s, and at the time I wasn't aware, but they were just starting their international expansion. So within a few years, I was given some short-term projects, doing market studies, looking at places like Turkey, Japan, Lithuania, and that gave me the travel bug. So when a full-time position became available in Korea, I jumped at it. And I think this first placement in Korea was probably culturally the most challenging one. The business out there was a joint venture between Tesco and Samsung, and over 95% of the management there were Koreans, and including President Lee, who was a very traditional, hierarchical style Korean leader there. So I had to learn quickly to adapt to that style. Also within my own team, I wasn't getting a lot of feedback within the office. And I did have to learn that it was by going out in the evening for team meals or for a drink. As soon as you were in a more casual environment was when they were able to open up to give me feedback about the cultural faux pas I might have made, or just to suggest better ways of doing things. Socially, though, I did land on my feet with this first role, and it's not something that I take for granted. When you move to a new place, it can take up to a year to build some friendships. In the Korea case, I found a hiking club within the first couple of weeks of arriving in the country, and that was really my Saturdays sorted. We would go hiking in the beautiful mountains around Seoul and then share a meal together. And eventually through the club, I met my wife, and that has obviously given me more enduring Korean connections. And in the 20 years that we've been married, we've moved 10 times. Really a tour of East Asia. So we've been in Korea, we've been in China, we've been in Malaysia, in Singapore, and now based in Hong Kong. And also in that time, I've done location planning in a number of different retail sectors. So supermarkets with Tesco, sports with Adidas, a period with a startup location planning consultancy, which was a lot of fun, but unfortunately didn't survive the COVID period. And now I'm in coffee shops with Starbucks. With all of this moving, obviously the downside is it's hard to really put down roots, and the friendships are quite transient. On the other hand, though, you do get to know a lot of people, and it is amazing how often our paths do cross in the small world of international living. The last two roles I've had have both had an Asia-Pacific coverage, and I really do enjoy the challenge of working in such a diverse region. So we have developed countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, Korea, where there's very good spending power, but the location challenges are really around working with the real estate, which is expensive, and the cost of running the stores as well. And then we have the more developing countries, the likes of Indonesia, India, Vietnam, where the target population is relatively small, but it is growing with more urbanization and a middle class that's growing, and that needs to go into your planning and forecasting. Also in those markets, the data availability and quality is more limited, so you have to be a little bit more creative in terms of how you do your planning. And I do love just that diverse region in terms of getting to understand the consumer behaviors and the real estate situations in each of those markets. I would say there is a big overlap between the traits that make a good location planner and what you need to be successful in working overseas. So this includes inquisitiveness, wanting to embrace or get to know the local culture, the consumer behavior, and just generally an attitude of trying anything once. So I'm very grateful for the opportunities I've had to be working out here, and I would definitely recommend working abroad to any other location planners. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Coco based in China. and I'm a location planner at Geolytix on international projects. Looking back for 25 years, I didn't have something like location planning in my dictionary at all, let alone the international location planning. When I took the interview for the position of translator for Tesco China site research back in 2002, I was asked a question. If you are going to open a hypermarket in your city, where would you put it and why? That was definitely one of the key moments that has influenced my entire career. And that year, I have traveled to some 30 cities with a site research team, doing the translation and supporting on hypermarket and site evaluation. Then, about 15 years later, when I first met with Geolytix, another interesting question was chatted about. What would you recommend as the best proxy to understand the affluence at the granular level in China? Again, a classical question you would expect when planning a store network. What I didn't expect was the context of these kinds of questions later on expand to a much wider coverage, the global. Unlike 2002, when you had to carry a handful of maps, taking thousands of pictures with your digital camera, meeting the local stats bureau to collect the ground data. Nowadays, you're lucky enough to have huge amount of data at your fingertips and much more advanced technology. But even though, you may still find yourself often in a situation of looking for extra data and insights when it comes to analyzing how the local people engage with a particular brand, building a sales forecast model, and eventually to build a network plan for the market. Apart from the generic factors like population, demographic, traffic, POI, etc., you may also want to understand the diversified landscape, especially the retail landscape, the different climates, seasonality, inflation issue, culture and lifestyle, etc. For example, in Saudi Arabia, drive culture is so dominating. Even a pharmacy store can be a standalone drive-through. And when we did a project in Myanmar, we modeled against the store transaction rather than the sales because of the rapid inflation. In terms of the potential barriers or challenges, I would say things like data granularity in less developed markets or identifying the true outlier when you have got very limited sample size. Sense checking the data, the model and output against the real world in the local context can all be pretty time consuming. I'm sure my colleagues would have loads of stories to share on that perspective. There could be some other inconveniences working on global market as well, such as time differences. You may need to get up 5:30 in the morning to prepare for a presentation later that day, or adapt a bit on your dinner time. Fortunately, I have got nice colleagues and clients who'd always respect the differences. Everyone tries best to fit in. Teamwork is definitely a super important thing in the work of global location planning. By teamwork, I mean not just the contribution from our data scientists, analysts, and engineers, but also the valuable insights and experiences from our clients and their local team, including the local franchisees, who know so well on the market. I'm sure you will never get bored working on international location planning. There could always be something new you can find on the way, either from the markets or the people you work with. And when you watch the world news, the names like Iraq or Guatemala suddenly become so lively and relevant to you. So, if you're considering to work on international location planning, I'd say go get it.